What is going on, my faithful friends? Thanks for tuning in for another edition of SEC Insider, brought to you by our good friends at Keep Alabama Beautiful. We thank you for our sponsorship all season long. And we join now by Tom Green, who's going to help us make some sense of what we saw happen this weekend at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn giving up a 25-point lead to fall to Mississippi State, 43-34, and what was definitely a hard one to watch, especially there in the second half, and just a big kind of sigh. And I want to get into that and sort of the struggles that we saw for Auburn on the offensive and defensive side of the footballs. But first, we need to start out with Bo Nix. Certainly the big story coming out of that football game. Bo Nix sustaining a severe ankle injury, and that was not even assessed until after the game that the ankle was broken. Ended up having to have surgery on that. He is out for the season. So kind of take us through that, Tom, and the significance of this injury and this loss for Auburn.
Oh yeah, I mean it's huge. I mean, Bo has started 34 consecutive games since he's been at Auburn. He started every game that he's been in an Auburn uniform. Say what you want about his career, been up and down, especially his first two seasons. But this year, he very clearly made some strides under Brian Harsin and Mike Bobo, and he had one of his better games of his career in that loss against Mississippi State. Yes, the offense, was inconsistent in the second half, as it has been in, the last few games. But he threw for 377 yards, 2 touchdowns, completed 61% of his passes. Probably could have had 2 more touchdowns. I know that, that 57-yarder that Javarius Johnson had in the first quarter, it was ultimately ruled a run because it was a lateral, but, Nix made that play happen. Then their last touchdown of the game, right before Tank Bigsby punched it in, Bo probably should have had another touchdown there, but it got overruled and got called down at the 1. So, you're looking at, probably one of the more prolific games of his career high passing yards. And he's just, I know we joke about the meme, he's having fun, he's comfortable and all that stuff, but, he was looking more comfortable in this offense. Anytime you lose your starting quarterback, that's going to be tough. But hey, this is one of the reasons why Auburn went out there and got TJ Finley this summer. They needed depth in that room. They got someone with SEC experience, someone who has shown in a game this year already that he can guide this offense to some success. And now we're going to see what he can do.
Yeah, definitely. An interesting situation. And again, I don't think. It's certainly a blow for Auburn to lose Bo Nix, especially as we've seen him to continue to grow, continue to just sort of settle into his role as a quarterback. And, while it hasn't been perfect and there's been some struggles there, you can't put A, all of it on him, and B, his toughness. He's a fighter, and we certainly wish him well to a speedy recovery. Tough way to definitely end the season. And, just to me, it kind of takes some of the wind out of the sails. Obviously, the momentum Auburn had coming into the Mississippi State game was sort of, released as well, obviously from the win, but just kind of thinking at where they're at in the season, certainly to me, a very substantial, significant loss for them. But TJ Finley will have the opportunity to come in. We'll see what he can do. So I think all eyes will be on him. Also, Carlson out as well, at least for this game. I know that he was injured in this matchup against Mississippi State as well. And so, their star kicker, certainly another injury that is noteworthy as well. All right. So Auburn, again, we talked about the 25-point lead, kind of letting things slip away. If you could kind of just condense things into some, I guess, tangible talking points, what in the heck happened offensively and defensively? We just saw things kind of disintegrate right before our eyes there in the second half.
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I touch on that, I do want to say you mentioned Bo Nix's toughness, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. I mean, that was a gutsy performance from him. Obviously, played very well throughout the game, but after he had his ankle rolled up there late in the third quarter, he stayed in the game for basically another 15 minutes. Completed 9 of 17 passes for 109 yards. Led Auburn on his only touchdown drive of the second half before he finally came out there in the last 3 minutes. So, I mean, kudos to him to, try to fight through that injury, play as well as he did. And then, obviously he didn't know the extent of the injury at the time, but to then sit down and speak with the media after the game and not make any excuses for, for himself with the injury or for Auburn, just a lot of respect for him for all of that. As for the game itself, I mean, where do you start? Touched on it earlier, but the offense in the second half of games the last 3 weeks has just been really bad. 9 points in 18 drives. They just had 6 points in the second half there against Mississippi State, and it's almost baffling because you look at that first half. Auburn was in an offensive rut coming into this game, but in that first half, they just came out clicking on all cylinders, scored touchdowns on each of their first four drives. Looks like they were going to cruise to an easy win here. Defense, it came out real strong, picked up right where it left off in that Texas A&M game. First quarter especially, didn't allow any rushing yards. Not that Mississippi State runs the ball that much. Only allowed 58 passing yards and, made Will Rogers uncomfortable. But then after that, I think he only had 3 incompletions the rest of the game. Things went sideways, and they went sideways in a hurry for this defense. I'd never imagined I'd see the day that, with this level of talent, that Auburn's defense would give up 40 unanswered points.
Yeah.
I mean, any way you slice it, this was a catastrophe for Auburn. Biggest blown lead in program history at 25 points. You lose your starting quarterback. You lose your, veteran kicker. I mean, that's about as bad of a loss as I've seen from Auburn.
Yeah, and to your point, you kind of answer. So the question is, what happened? And it's easy to answer what happened on the outside, right? What we saw unfold, but it still is just so hard to kind of wrap your mind around, giving up that kind of lead. And there's so many variables and so many things internally that happen, but definitely a tough one. And so I think going into this next game against South Carolina on the road, Auburn's a 2-score favorite coming into this one. I think to me, it's an attitude game for Auburn. What's the attitude going to be when you go on the road and you play a South Carolina team that has also had their own struggles? They've had some up and downs. They're coming off a massive win over Florida, which now after Florida not competing so mightily against Samford, you kind of scratch your head with that one. But then they go to Missouri. They can't get the job done against Missouri, and in a game that you thought you beat a Florida team the way you did, and then you don't get it done against Missouri. So plenty to kind of unpack there. But, I think to me, it's an attitude game. When you look at this Auburn team and that momentum that they had going into this game against Mississippi State, and then kind of having to take the back seat in many ways, like, are they going to come in deflated, or are they going to really step up to the challenge? With Bo Nix there being injured, and now TJ Finley taking over, and certainly just the mental aspect of it. So where does that look? So, with that being said, just getting ready for the South Carolina team, and then Alabama just on the back end of that, what, in your opinion, does this Auburn team really need to do to kind of prove itself and to sort of pick up the pieces as we saw things sort of crumble this past weekend, for them to at least say, hey, we fought till the finish? And obviously going into the bowl season, what do you want to see from this football team that kind of just resurrects sort of what we saw this past weekend?
Yeah, well, Brian Harsin kind of talked about after the game, the challenge now is, after having that kind of collapse and, that kind of loss, just, how do you keep morale high? That's going to be the challenge this week. And, I think Auburn is, they're going to be upset about what they did, about how they performed on both sides of the ball there. And, for most part of that game, I think they're going to come out angry. And I think that this is going to be a team that, look, they know that they have more talent than South Carolina. They already have a chip on their shoulder from that loss last year at South Carolina. Now they're, getting the rare opportunity to go back there again this year, to, kind of, make up for that performance last year. And I think this team's going to rally around TJ Finley. You got to remember, TJ Finley's first start when he was at LSU last year was against South Carolina, and he completed 81% of his passes for 265 yards and a pair of touchdowns. So they've got a quarterback who, has experience and confidence going against this team. And I think they're going to rally around him and, try to make the most of what they can with the rest of the season. Of course, they should beat South Carolina. That's a game that they should win. We said the same thing last year, though, when they lost at South Carolina. And then, you don't need to get these guys up for the Iron Bowl. They know what it means. It's going to be a tall order for them, obviously, Alabama being the number 2 team in the country. But the game's at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn weird things happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium when Auburn and Alabama meet. So, I think this team, will find solace in all of that these next 2 weeks. It's just a matter of how quickly they can put that loss behind them and, move forward with a fresh mindset.
Yeah, no doubt. Lots of things to grapple with this upcoming week, but I think Harsin addressing that in that post-game press conference, talking about it this week, and I know we'll hear from him a little bit later today at 1:30. Just realizing right off the bat, like, morale's going to be low, and we've got to do our best to combat that this week. I think, to me, that's the big focus, right? I think that's going to be the big focus in practice this week as they do prepare for a South Carolina team that you certainly cannot sleep on, as you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. That game on the road, South Carolina, 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN, and then Alabama, they'll face Alabama after Thanksgiving there for the Iron Bowl, and that'll be a 2:30 kick on CBS. So certainly looking forward to it. Tom, we appreciate all your updates as always and all your insight. I know you got a busy one ahead of you this week as you're getting ready for the Iron Bowl, trying to get things moving forward. So we appreciate your time, and we appreciate our sponsors as well. Keep Alabama beautiful, and we appreciate all of you guys for